So Yitzi, this week, Parshat Vayakhel Pekudei, Parshat Chodesh, Shabbos Mevorchim, a lot going on this Shabbos. However, we talked about the first word of this week's laning of this week's Parashot, the actual word of Vayakhel. We're so used to hearing it as a Parsha, as the name of a Parsha, we don't even notice sometimes that this is the first time this word appears in the Torah.
And as we said, this obviously happened every single time Moshe spoke to Am Yisrael, they gathered together. But the Torah makes a point of telling us this right here, right now, in this timing, just after everything they've gone through, and just before what they're about to achieve. That's the moment where this word appears, and we dive deep into that.
Exactly, an important message on what does it mean to have a community, because the word Vayakhel is from the Shoresh Kahal, from Kehillah, from a community. One of the biggest things people look for today is a sense of a community, but there are some important rules in order to build a strong and valid and valuable community, rules that are important to understand. Why this word appears here in the beginning of this week's parasha. Hope you enjoy it. Take a look. This week, this Shabbos, a lot going on in this Shabbos. 2 Parshas, plus a Maftir Chodesh, and also Shabbos Mevorchim, and we're finishing Sefer Shemot. But really, what I want to talk about is actually the first word of the Parsha. The first word of Parashat Vayakhel, the word Vayakhel, because we are very used to the fact that this Parsha is called Vayakhel Pekudei or Vayakhel, and we're used to hearing this word Vayakhel. But really, when you look in the Torah, this is the first time and the only time where it says that Moshe actually gathers Am Yisrael all together. Vayakhel uses that word to describe Moshe getting everybody together, and you have to ask why. Why does Moshe have to gather everybody together? Why do we need this Vayakhel before Moshe telling Am Yisrael about Shabbos and about the Mishkan? What is the purpose of this gathering of everybody together? What does it mean, Vayakhel? Why is it being used over here?
Yeah, well, I assume every single time Moshe spoke to them, they had to gather so they can actually hear him. So probably this is something that happened every single time, but only this time we see it in the Psukim. The Torah makes a point of telling us Vayakhel Moshe, that they gathered together. And I think, and we've said this many times in the past, to truly understand this pasuk, we have to take a step back and look at what happened just before and what's happening after. We just finished the story of Chet HaEgel. We just finished this moment where everything collapsed, everything falls apart. Am Yisrael, just like the luchot that were broken into pieces, was also broken into pieces, was also spread out into many different pieces. Yeah, we got another version of the luchot. Yeah, we were forgiven, but in a certain sense, Am Yisrael has lost that initial state of pre-Matan Torah, of everyone standing together. Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged ha'ar. We had that togetherness and we accepted Torah, and something went wrong. But I think it's even deeper than that, because if you try to figure out what went wrong, what is the sin of Chet HaEgel? And we've mentioned this in the past, the famous Kuzari, who tries to figure out what went wrong because they were trying to serve God. It's very clear in the Psukim, meaning if they wanted to go against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the last person they would ask for help from is Aaron. They come to Aaron and ask him to help them out. They were searching for God. But as Rabbi Yehuda Levi describes in the Kuzari, something went wrong. And what went wrong is that instead of looking for God the way God taught us to search for Him, they were looking for God through their own way. Let's find a way to reach God. We're missing Moshe. Let's invent a new way. And we know this feeling. Many times when people talk about religion, talk about serving God, they all want to do it in their own way. You want to feel, I want to have my own experience. This is how I connect. And there's a lot of talk about that, my way to connect. And there's importance to that. And we've discussed this too in the past. There's different ways and everyone has their path. But at the end of the day, the focus of I want to connect my way is a focus inwards. It's saying, I'm going to look at what to me makes sense. This is the way to reach God, and that's the way I'm going to do it. And says Rabbi Yehuda Levi, that's the chet of Chet HaEgel. Because the idea of godliness revealing Himself to human beings is unbelievable, is unthinkable, is something that's impossible to grasp. And the only way it could be is if God Himself teaches you and leads you how to achieve that. So the sin begins by them finding their own way, doing their own thing. But there's another aspect of that. The minute everyone's doing their own thing, what do you lose? You lose the Vayichan Sham Yisrael. You lose the togetherness. We're not focused on this. Each one has their own thing. Each one's doing their own religion. Each one's in their own world. After Chet HaEgel, what we need now is to bring us back together. And how does Moshe do that? Listen to the words. Vayakhel Moshe, he brings them together. How? He says, Ele hadvarim asher tziva Hashem la'asot otam. What's going to bring you together? I'm going to tell you now, not what you think you need to do. No. I'm going to tell you what Hashem said you need to do. And that's going to be able to bring you all together, because it's not going to be about each one thinking what their own thing and how they want to do it. It's them focusing, and as we'll see in the next Parsha, how it goes through every single detail. And what do? Exactly as they're told. As they were commanded, that's what they do. They've taken the search for godliness from something inwards to something outwards. What does God want from me? And when the focus is what does God want from me, suddenly not only do I see God, but also I see everyone else around me who are also searching that same God and are all together trying to achieve that same goal. When I have a goal, when I'm trying to listen outwards and not inwards, then I also can connect to the people around me and together go and achieve that goal.
Exactly. This point that you're saying, where after Chet HaEgel, Am Yisrael were shattered, just like the Luchot, this naiveness that Am Yisrael had before Matan Torah, or throughout Matan Torah, before the punishment of Chet HaEgel, where everything was so wonderful, but also was so simple. Yeah, they had these little obstacles on the way, no water here, no food there, but suddenly this big punishment, this big sin, and this big punishment of Chet HaEgel kind of really hit them hard, so hard, and not only is there suddenly some kind of a distance between them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but also between them and Moshe Rabbeinu himself, because as we see in last week's Parasha, where Moshe takes his tent and takes it out of the Machaneh, and now he's outside of the public, outside of the Tzibur, outside of the Kahal. And not only that, even when he walks around, he puts on a mask. He's really distant from them. He's really disconnected from them. And this disconnecting of Moshe from Am Yisrael is what leads Moshe Rabbeinu to gather them back, to Vayakhel Moshe, to try to bring them back. And interestingly, also Rashi points out, he didn't force them to come back. He didn't go with his hands and collect them together. Rather, he spoke, and then they gathered themselves, because it awoken something within them, understanding that they have to gather together. And Moshe standing up and giving them this mission of Shabbos and of the Mishkan, of the Mikdash, of building a place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. When he gives them these missions, this is what brings them together. This is what makes this kahal. Because as we know also today, when you look around, people always look for what we call a sense of a community. People need a community around them. People need to feel that they are part of something greater. It's not only them on their own and them by themselves, but they need to feel that there are more people around them. This is one of the things that social media did, that even the weirdest people with the weirdest thoughts can find people like them and connect to them, and through that somehow validate their thoughts, validate their opinions, validate their so-called faith. But this is also the biggest problem with a community. This is one of the biggest dangers that a community can create. The sense of a community is giving you this false validation, of giving you this feeling and assurance that this idea you're following is a good idea because other people are following it too. And this is maybe what the Midrash over here, the Midrash Shimoni, is trying to point out, of this connection between Vayakhel Moshe and Shabbos. As we see in the beginning of this week's parasha, says the Midrash, from here we learn that every Shabbos you should have gatherings together, kihilot, in order to learn Torah. And interestingly also, the Midrash over there points out that during those gatherings you should learn specific halachas that are relevant for that time. 30 days before the Chag, for Pesach you should learn about Pesach, and for Atzeret about Atzeret, in order to make sure that these gatherings, that these communities are focused around the truth, around our real faith, around something that is real, and Chaz v'Chalila, not some kind of false prophecy or some kind of false idea that people are trying to follow, like we see so many times happen around us. And also, by the way, very interesting, we see in Sefer Melachim, where Shlomo builds the Beit HaMikdash, just before they inaugurate Beit HaMikdash, when he calls Am Yisrael to come and bring the Aron and celebrate the opening, the inauguration of Beit HaMikdash, the Navi also over there uses the term Az Yakhel Shlomo et Bnei Yisrael. Also, Shlomo gets Am Yisrael to gather together in order to build the Beit HaMikdash. And maybe again, this is the whole point, the reasoning for having the Mishkan, for having a Mikdash, for having a place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shechina is represented in this world, is in order for us to have a place where we can gather together and gather around 3 times a year, shalosh pamim b'shana, and also in mitzvat hakel after Shemitah, in order for us to go there and be reminded about the truth, about what our real ideals are, what our real faith is about, what our real purpose in life should be about. This is the purpose of the Mishkan, to remind us of our purpose. This is the idea of gathering around it, to make sure that the gatherings, that the communities, that the kehillah, that the hakel that is created, that is the basis for Am Yisrael, is all gathered around the Mishkan and around Aron HaBrit and HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Exactly, and as you're saying, when people gather gather, there has to be something to gather around, some purpose. And maybe that's also what's happening here. They're not just gathering around to hear a nice speech about the importance of being together. They're gathering around la'asot otam, about something, a mission to actually do. There's a big difference between gathering around and talking about how important it is to gather around versus gathering around and actually having a mission, something, a joint mission that we work together to achieve. That's something that really brings people together. But actually, on the other hand, when you focus on actions and on doing, sometimes that can be something that separates people again. Because as we know, not everyone is going to be doing the same thing. We have the Tzalel, we have the different experts in different things. So not everyone is going to have that same part. So maybe that's why we talk about what we need to do, but how do we start? With Shabbos. Because Shabbos is the moment where we stop doing and recognize that everything we've been doing, every person in their own place and in their own thing and in their own specialty, everything we've all been doing, it's not about the work itself, it's about what it's for and what it's meant to be. And we only recognize that when we stop working for a moment. So we start by stopping. We start by recognizing Shabbos. We start by coming together for this mission and for this doing, which is going to bring us all back together again. But we start with recognizing Shabbos, which keeps the right mindset. Don't get too caught up in your part and what you need to do. Recognize what this is all for. And when you recognize what this is all for, you're going to appreciate what they're doing and what they're doing and the fact that we're all working together to reach that greater mission.
Very good, very good. And again, we can't stress this enough, how important it is to gather around something that is real, with real value and a real message that is greater than just a few individuals that are trying to get together. However, we're out of time, so we'll have to end here. We'll just remind our viewers what we've discussed the past couple of years. Last year in Parshat Vayakhel, we discussed Shabbos and Melacha. What is really Melacha about? What is Melacha? What is this thing that is called Melacha? It's not only actual labor that we do with our hands throughout the week. It's something more than that. Probably one of the more important lessons about our day-to-day life and the way we live our day-to-day life. We'll link that video at the end of this one. Also, 2 years ago in Parshat Vayakhel Pekudei, we discussed the end of Parshat Pekudei, where suddenly you'd think that the end of Sefer Shemot ends with the Shechina coming down onto the Mishkan. That's an appropriate ending for Sefer Shemot. However, after that, we still have a few more psukim describing to us the Anan, the cloud that led Am Yisrael in the desert. Why does Sefer Shemot end like that? We'll link that video too. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it, comment below on YouTube, and if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, please consider subscribing and help us grow the channel. And Shkoyach Yitzi.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov.
Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov, and Mitzvah Hashem. We'll talk again next week.